Now, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, the news that's dominated tech this week, because once again, some piece of arcane technical trivia resulted in, and when combined with a really high app store ranking of an app, a new app, combined with it happened to be Davos week and people were talking about it and all the billionaires were in a room getting all excited about it. The stock market just took a big old fucking shit because Nvidia has been propping up the all the stock indices with its absolute tear of just a valuation that can only go up. And DeepSeek, which was, kind of coincident with its sudden relevance and popularity in this app coming out, were news articles saying that it only took them $5.6 million worth of computation to train the final version of the model, which was that's going in the opposite direction of what OpenAI has been telling us, that level of investment and hardware that you'll need to make anything not only as good as but better than the current crop of large language models. And so this disrupted the narrative of, wow, like, man, these LLMs, we want to make them smarter. How can we make them smarter? And there's typically two paths in front of you, right? If you're a programmer, and this is the age-old thing. Like, and I think people who are technical, who thought about AI critically, and I like to think that I did, because I spent most of Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday texting my finance bro friends and saying, I told you so. There's two paths when you need to make something faster or scale better. One is you throw fucking hardware at it, and you just spend a lot of money, and you buy more computers, and you plug them all in. And ideally, that comes with the prerequisite of you need to make it scalable. You need to design the thing to be able to run on multiple computers. But like AI, because it came of age in the era when we kind of just know to do that, and because the types of computations that you need to perform are matrix multiplication, which turns out like that's exactly what GPUs have always been designed for. Graphics processing units have always been focused on matrix multiplication because it's also what you need to render 3D environments and apparently mine crypto, right? So like those simple computations we've had to figure out how to be able to paralyze the absolute living fuck out of them for so long that AI comes around and it's like, okay, so we know we can scale this shit if we just keep throwing GPUs at the problem, because GPUs are essentially infinitely scalable. So you can go down that path and you can just pay a goddamn fortune. Now, door number two is pause, take a walk, and think really, really hard about how you can get the same thing from the computer by doing less. How you can cut corners creatively so that your computer spends less time overall computing wastefully on stuff that it didn't really need to get to the answer. And therein lies the entire practice of algorithm design and profiling and, looking at performance and really scrutinizing. And it's a distillation. It's a simmering task because it's counterintuitive. The intuitive way is just burn, baby, burn. Let's just spend more money. And the hard thing is, especially when you feel urgency, because when you feel urgency, you got all the adrenaline in your system, you got all the testosterone firing, and you're like, we just got to go forward. It's like you're playing a contact sport and you just got to plow through and just fucking force it. But that's not the mindset that you need to redesign, challenge all your assumptions and redesign, like, how does this fucking thing work? Do we really need to, for example, invoke all of the model right now? Or can we just talk to just this corner of the model once we know that, like, the category of the request is here? Or like, could we, actually use reinforcement training, which is something that AI has been doing for years, especially when it comes to games. Like if you program an AI to play Tetris, you will give it reinforcement. If it scores higher, you'll say that was a better job, and it'll be able to train itself effectively. So basically, DeepSeek, Chinese company, they did not have access to the H100s and the amazing server-grade NVIDIA GPUs because the CHIPS Act and the Biden administration effectively told China, go fuck yourselves. And so they were operating under, they couldn't go down path A, right? They only had path B, which is like, be smarter. and design something that, given the constraints of just consumer grade graphics processing units, figure out something that is tractable. And they did. And they did in several different ways. They got the reinforcement learning. They've got, Sam Altman very hypocritically is like all in a huff because like they were using our model as input into their system. And then, so basically their whole model now is just trained off of our data. How dare they? Which of course is the literal thing he did to the whole fucking internet. So, a little bit of pot kettle black there, and hopefully he appreciates. I don't know that man can fucking think right now. He probably only sees blood vessels in his eyes because his IPO is just exploding in front of him and he's not going to be the next Steve Jobs. Like, he's seeing that whole path just evaporate because his entire course, his entire mission was based on this lie, this alpha male. I don't know what his technical chops are. I don't know if he was ever a programmer. I just know that the dude was like, he ran Y Combinator, which is like a Ponzi scheme generation system for startups in the Valley to like, we'll get all these founders and we'll take a big old chunk of like share in their business. And then they'll like live in a house together and then just code a lot and find, we'll connect them with a network of other people. But most of it is just wheeling and dealing and kind of providing access for investors to opportunities to invest in, and you get to be a middleman in that transaction. And so the answer to the question of should I invest, should we go bigger, should we scale higher, is always fucking yes. In fact, whenever you got a problem, the answer is almost always more scale. That's the guy. That's who Sam Altman is. That's like what he did and what he was good at, is making things that probably don't need to exist bigger. And so OpenAI, which is a company who has a product that's a chatbot, and I use it dozens of times a day. And I'm able to use it to meet many of my needs. A lot of people use it all the time, but it is a product that is like, you're looking at it and everyone's kind of like, so what's the killer app going to be? Because these valuations that you're talking about, this picture that to be a salesperson, to be selling investments, you've got to be selling a future. It's like, people won't have jobs anymore, is kind of like what he's selling, is this idyllic utopia that just is seemingly impossible, but the investments are increasing in proportion to that utopic vision and not to the, what are we actually seeing here? Like, what's the there in terms of what's going to justify this valuation? That disposition, that temperament, and it's got to start at the top because there's no one fucking left in OpenAI's leadership that was there when it was like, focused on the science of it all. That temperament will never respect and circle back and think like, how could we just do this smarter? I realize that it might take longer and we might not reach the same scale and we might not, if I've had customers before as a consultant where I told them like, hey, there's this path here where we can get a squad of like 4 people. We could build the whole fucking app. I told this to a person who's like a well-to-do VC. This is a long time ago. There's no NDA here. I told him we can build a whole fucking app in like 6 months on contract. And he's like, that's the worst thing that you could possibly do for me because I need to grow this to 1,000-person engineering team. And I was like, squeeze me? Like, why? Like, I didn't literally say why, because I kind of knew, right? Because you got to win the next round of investors in the next funding round by having the big office that's full of the foosball tables and the complimentary 1-minute massage chairs. You got to have that there so that they look around and think, oh, this is happening. This is where it's at. This is good. This is growing. And you got to demonstrate that growth by hiring more and more people and opening up more offices and having all these teams with these fancy titles. And you got to see that activity. If you just build the fucking thing, then I don't have a Ponzi game, a shell game to build my Ponzi scheme on top of. I need 4 rounds of investment after me so that I can exit. Because then I make my money. If the whole thing blows up, I don't fucking care. In fact, the longer that I stretch this out, the more I make in management fees. He didn't literally spell out all that stuff to me, but that is the fucking game. That is what they play. And that Sam Altman is a master in that game. Except this time he finally gets to be the highly visible CEO. And yeah, DeepSeek, all it did is just it just took a mathy sciencey approach, which a lot of people are doing because a lot of people are interested in AI, and it pantsed him. because unlike all these other foundational models that are sort of, like, and a lot of the investment, a lot of the creative stuff happening in AI is sort of happening in this disintermediated fashion, where it's like, well, I'm going to build something on top of OpenAI because building a foundational model is like really hard, or I'm going to do something on top of Anthropic's models or something. And all of that is then one layer removed further into like which cloud provider is going to have the GPUs to be able to run that model. And it's not that like literally all of us are operating under this assumption that it must be this way, that you need this many GPUs, both for creation of the models and also for inference, that is to ask the model questions. It's just that like, I don't got that kind of time. Like I'm just a dude, and like, I'm not even a sciencey mathy dude, but like they're out there. But to have a company at the scale that the DeepSeek folks are, and to have it operating under constraint such that like they can't just play that game and go to the GPU well and just get more money, and they had to come up with a different way. So what was so bizarre about this whole last year, 2 years, is that like as the march of all of the major tech companies in the US have just been saying, well, then that's why we got to buy even more of these NVIDIA GPUs, inflating like NVIDIA's revenue and profits to just the stratosphere. You'd get laughed out of the room if you tried to just raise a moderate amount of money, right? Just enough for a small team or a medium-sized company to go and build a model in a slightly different way. Like on the order of 50 to 150 or 50 million to 500 million, like in that range, they'd say, well, no, because it's clearly good. You're never going to compete with one of the big dogs here. And because you can't get that amount of funding, then you're just left with a whole bunch of pointy-haired PhDs telling us, and they've been telling us with blog posts and with like proofs of concept, like, actually, this could be done a lot better. Here's all the ways it could be done better. And the best way that they could make an impact was, I'm going to write a paper, I'm going to write a blog post. Hopefully somebody who works at one of these exactly 4 fucking companies will read this paper and then integrate it into their very big model, right? That's the best shot that we had. And of course, no one in the sort of like, the financial class is going to see that pipeline of I'm a blog post and I'm on the front page of Hacker News, and then I turn into like advice on like why OpenAI is actually quite inefficient or why these many GPUs aren't necessary. Because like the pump and dump scheme, like the game is still being played. Like there's no proof yet. And the only way to get proof is by way of these 4 or 5 companies making foundational models. Now you've got somebody who's playing the game under completely different rules in China. It's outside the market, and it's under the... I don't mean to make too much of a point of the like fact that they did not have access to NVIDIA's like, server grade equipment. But one imagines that like if China really was serious about like just subsidizing the shit out of this so that they could take the lead in a major technological, wave like this, a revolution like this, they probably would have bought a bunch of them. I have to imagine. So it was kind of a perfect storm to not advance AI. It's not like this is the next thing. We're all going to be DeepSeek heads for the rest of our lives. All they had to do was show that the emperor had no clothes, that this is achievable without giving into the narrative that the only way forward to make these large language models, which seem to be kind of creaking at the edge of diminishing returns now, that the only way forward is $1 trillion or 5 new nuclear power plants to train it, right? Like, the things that Sam Altman has said are necessary are absolutely fucking comical. And they have to be if you're a person who can only imagine numbers going up in relatively predictable and naive ways. But if you can imagine like, oh, actually we were solving the wrong problem or we were approaching it from the wrong angle, and there's a way that we could do it that is actually thanks to science and thanks to induction. Like there's a way smarter way to be doing what we're doing. That doesn't fit into the economic narrative of how startups grow up to be the next behemoth. Look, I don't know Sam Altman. He seems like a perfectly reasonable weirdo, but we have this great man theory, and it's tied up, I think, in the idea that like America and the American dream is truly meritocratic. And so you have this one group of people on one side, this sort of like libertarian Ayn Randian, like, hey, if somebody is rich, they are kind of like definite or at the top of a big company, and that company is in the front page of the Wall Street Journal all the time, then they are definitionally have merit or intelligence or something about them that earns them that. And of course, and if you're a hardcore believer in that, then anything contradicting that would give lie to your entire ideology. And of course, that's not literally true. And if you were to frame it that way, most of those folks would say, okay, yeah, sure, there's other factors. Now, on the other end, there's people who are just like the anti-capitalists, like, no, this is all like inside game, and it's all like everything is made, we're all, they're a huge, complicated system, and it's all out there to fuck us. And the people who win are just like a Manchurian candidate or a stooge that's propped up by that system, and we're all just victims. Like, I hate to say it, but I kind of feel like the truth is somewhere in the middle here, right? It's like, yeah, you know, you do try harder, you work harder, you're ambitious, you're competitive, you're probably going to come out ahead relative to somebody who's otherwise very similar to you, similarly situationed and positioned, who doesn't have those attributes. The flip side, though, is like, if you just happen to be in the Bay Area, you're statistically way more likely to have made a lot of money, you know, if you're in my particular generation. And that's not like random chance, right? Like, it's not a truly like a pure meritocratic view of the world, right? Maybe this is why I've had so many people talk about like, oh, there's so many people moving to San Francisco. It's like, I know a lot of fucking locals who got super duper rich because they were right place, right time, and like they had the access and then the network to get the great job at that startup when it was going from 100 to 1,000 so that some VC could get paid. Like, so there's it's uncomfortable. But like, the truth is that Sam Altman is not a fucking dummy. He's somebody who's ambitious, who seems really smart. He's got an incredible network, and he's audacious. He's got a vision. And there's other really like top of the, you know, executive rooms in all these companies that are like, they're real similar, but like, they're still just fucking people. Like, painting like them as like they must either be a benevolent genius or some kind of supervillain not only gives them too much credit, but I think it robs us of the opportunity to see like the broader systems at play. And so in this particular case, listening to the news and the analysis this week, I was impressed that so many people were bringing up the trade restrictions and that aspect of it. But like, not a lot of people are really asking themselves like, how do we keep creating these bubbles over and over again? And connecting the dots that the reason we create the bubbles is that the thing that we're valuing these companies based on is based on an ideology that like turns out to not very well model the world, right? Like, the idea that if you can just make it bigger and higher headcount and greater scale and in the hands or on the phones of more people, and if you can build some kind of moat around it, then you're just in like Flynn and you're going to matter forever. And whatever you say in terms of your cockamamie fake accounting, like, you're going to be the next big thing. Even though we have so many examples of companies that were the next big thing, and they checked all those boxes and they had the big IPO, but it just turned out that the fundamentals of their business were based on spending, for example, on every single direct-to-consumer app for fucking ever, was based on them using marketing money to overpay people on one side of the market, like say Uber drivers, and to subsidize the cost of rides on the other side, all with the promise that they'd figure it out in post, right? How many times do we have to go and see this movie to get to the same goddamn result? I think, look, this is just one blip in what will surely be an onward march down the AI train and investment and stuff. I don't think this is going to be the kind of come to Jesus moment that I would personally hope for it to be. But it's an interesting lodestone that hopefully we can point to say, like, look, like, this is a great example of how the naive kind of putting the blinders up and just thinking the only way to advance is to grow is full of shit. So we'll see where things go. Most things are going to be the same. Things will get a little bit better, and people all learned a valuable lesson about how to train LLMs. But I don't think that very many people will have learned a valuable lesson about like the broader system that keeps creating these bubbles and wasting so much human capital and literal dollars on shit we just don't need.